All right, let's dive into what's happening today because we are looking at a single, absolutely wild day in American weather, February 9th, 2026. Seriously, it is a day of stunning contrasts. You've got one part of the nation just starting to thaw out from a deep freeze, another is baking in record-breaking heat, and a massive storm is brewing just off the coast. The atmosphere is in total turmoil, and we're going to break it all down for you.
Sometimes the meteorologists have a way with words, and this quote from the U.S. Meteorological Synopsis, man, it just nails it. Extreme thermal disequilibrium. Now, that's just a really scientific way of saying the country is literally being torn between two completely opposite temperature extremes. This one phrase, it's the key to understanding all the wild weather we're about to explore.
Now, to really get what's going on, you have to remember where we just were. This isn't happening in a vacuum. No, this is right after a truly historic polar vortex. Just a few days ago, millions of people in the Northeast and Midwest were dealing with life-threatening wind chills, as low as -40 degrees. That deep, brutal Arctic cold is basically the ghost that's haunting the first part of our story today. So, how is the country recovering? Let's start on the East Coast, where the big story is the thaw. But listen, this is not some gentle, gradual warming, no way. This is happening with shocking speed. And this right here, this is the definition of weather whiplash. The morning literally starts with wind chill advisories still in effect. It is dangerously cold, especially in those sheltered valleys where the cold air just settles in. But then, as the day goes on, the whole wind pattern shifts and it starts pulling in milder air from the southwest, and temperatures just begin to skyrocket. This isn't just a warm-up, it's a total thermal shock to the system. Want a perfect example of this craziness? Just look at Philadelphia. Over the weekend, they're under extreme cold warnings. It's a dangerous Arctic outbreak. Less than 48 hours later, the forecast is calling for a high of 58 degrees. That is a massive, massive swing from a dangerous deep freeze to a day that feels like early spring. Okay, so while the East is thawing out, let's shift our focus to the middle of the country, because here, things aren't just getting back to normal, they are absolutely rocketing to the other extreme. The Central Plains are experiencing something truly remarkable for early February. So what's behind this? It's a massive high-pressure ridge that's basically parked itself right over the plains. Think of it like a giant invisible lid on the atmosphere. It forces the air to sink, and as it sinks, it gets compressed and warms up dramatically. And we're not talking about just a few degrees above normal. Oh no, we're seeing temperatures 35 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit above average, all the way from Texas up to Nebraska. But how does that actually work? I mean, how do you get temperatures in the 70s, even 80s, in a place like Kansas in the middle of February? Well, the answer is this really cool mix of geography and physics. Okay, so let's break this down. You've got air flowing over the massive Rocky Mountains. As it comes down the other side, what we call the leeward side, it gets squeezed by increasing air pressure. And that compression, it causes rapid heating. We're talking about a process called adiabatic warming. For every 1,000 feet that air descends, it heats up by about 5.5 degrees. This downslope flow is basically supercharging the heat wave across the high plains. So this incredible warmth, it's not just something to marvel at. It's actually creating a really dangerous situation. When you mix this kind of record heat with a few other specific ingredients in the atmosphere, you get the perfect setup for a serious hazard. And here's that dangerous recipe. First ingredient, you've got the record heat just baking all those dormant winter grasses. Second, that same sinking air that's causing the heat, it is incredibly dry. It drops the humidity levels all the way down to 10 or 15%. Then you just add in some gusty winds and boom, you have the perfect conditions for fast-moving grass fires, and that's why we're seeing widespread warnings all across the plains. All right, last stop on our tour of extremes. Let's head to the West Coast. Now, while the rest of the country is dealing with this crazy temperature whiplash, the West is actually in a bit of a calm period. But you know how it is with weather. This calm is really just the quiet before the storm. I mean, look at this. Today is just a gorgeous day across the Southwest. You got LA hitting 83, Phoenix at 85. It feels more like May than February. But the meteorologists, they're not just looking at today. Their eyes are glued to what's brewing way out over the Pacific. And what they're seeing is something that has a name that sounds like it's straight out of a movie, an atmospheric river. And let me tell you, that name perfectly captures its power. This is the big one, the weather maker that is set to completely change the story for the West Coast by the end of the week. So what is an atmospheric river? The absolute best way to picture it is a fire hose of moisture in the sky. Seriously. It's this long, narrow band that's just funneling an unbelievable amount of water vapor, all the way from the tropics. And when you aim that fire hose at the mountains on the west coast, well, it unloads all that moisture as incredibly heavy rain and snow. Okay, so let's put all of the pieces of this puzzle together. We've got the eastern thaw, the central sizzler, and the western storm just waiting in the wings. How is all of this going to play out over the coming week? Let's take a look at the timeline. So this timeline really tells two different tales, doesn't it? The first half of the week is pretty quiet, a few minor fast-moving systems in the east. But the real headline, the main event, is that major atmospheric river event that builds all week and finally slams into the west coast starting Friday.
And here's exactly what's at stake with this storm. We are not talking about just a little rain here. The risk is high for feet of snow in the Sierra Nevada. We're talking potentially over 2 feet. Now, that's critical for the state's water supply, but it's also a massive travel hazard. At the same time, you have the threat of flooding for cities all up and down the California coast, from the Bay Area right down to SoCal. And to top it all off, it's going to spin up a whole new windy system for the plains.
So when you step back and look at this one single day, from life-threatening wind chills to record-breaking heat, from critical fire danger to a massive flood threat on the horizon, it really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? This incredible volatility, these wild, rapid swings from one extreme to another, it feels like that's the defining story of this winter. And it really leaves you with a big question. Is this the new normal we should be preparing for?